Hi, welcome to the Gamesplainer. I'm Jeff the Gamesplainer and today I'm gamesplaining Iwari. So Iwari is a early pre-people or early people type of game where you're discovering your world or the world that is being created by this board. On the board there are a whole bunch of different areas or different types of areas, so volcano or wind area. There's potentially multiples of that area depending on which side of the board you're playing. Will change the numbers within that of each area. What you're doing is you have 3 cards. You are choosing 1, 2, or 3 of those cards to play. If you play 2 of the same, they can act as if they're a single wild of another type, but you can only play in one area. So if I play a volcano card, I'm placing something in one volcano area. If I'm playing 2 volcano cards, I'm placing 2 pieces in one volcano area. If I'm playing a volcano and 2 wind cards, I can use those 2 wind as if they're a volcano and place 2 pieces in the volcano area. What I'm trying to do is to build up my area that I've covered to be able to get points, because this game has a really interesting way of scoring, and it's actually worth thinking about of what's actually going to happen with the scoring here, because the person who has the most tents in an area when we get through to the scoring, they are going to get a point for every tent in the area. The person who has the second most tents in an area will get a point for every tent that the first person has, or the majority person has. Third gets the number of points for the tents of the second. Fourth gets the number of points for the third. We see how this kind of is building up. Fifth gets number of points for the fourth, if it goes that far down. And so having just one tent in a large area, especially if someone else is taking every other spot, can actually be super worthwhile. So if there's 7 spots in an area and one person has taken 6, you taking the other spot is going to get you 6 points, whereas the person who's taking the 6 is only going to get 7 points out of that. It's a funky way of scoring. I quite like it. It's really hard to understand and to explain, but the actual doing of it makes absolute sense. So once everyone has the idea of what's happening with that scoring, it's going to move forward. And you kind of need to keep that scoring in mind as you're playing the game, which is something I don't tend to do. I'll play along and then we get to that point of scoring and go, oh, that's right, scoring. Yeah, let's see what happens. I think that the people who are watching that and thinking on that are going to do well. So if they can see that someone has a very large majority in an area and no one else is going there, just placing one tent might actually be a really worthwhile thing for them to do. The other element with this game is the totems. So when you place things in an area, if you're the first in the area, you must place a tent, and that's all you're allowed to place. If a tent has been placed, it doesn't matter if it's yours or someone else's, you can place other stuff in that area. So more tents or totems. Now, what the totem is a piece that just gets placed as if it's a totem pole, and they'll get all stacked on top of each other. Every color can be there if it wants. And what we're looking at then, when we get to the final scoring, so the second round of scoring, we score those 10 majorities in an area first, then we go to a totem scoring. And what you're looking is 2 different areas that are next to each other. If you have a majority on the totems in both those areas, then you will score both those areas. The totems of both those areas, that is. So if I have a majority over here of 1, because I'm the only person who's put a totem in on that space, and a majority here, it could be shared majority, by the way. So if I've put something in and someone else has put something in, I've still got majority, that's worth 3 points. Whereas if I have the 1 here and here has 2 from everyone, if I'm in a 3-player game, there's 6 pieces on that. Every single person has that majority. So the person who has majority in the other spot is going to score 6 points here plus their 1 majority in the other spot, or 2 majority, whatever it is, in the other spot. And that can actually be some really sizable points. If you watch my games play, you'll actually see that happening. I think that the player who wins is because of one of those taller totems, and just having majority in that has been enough to give them the win. I'll let you be the judge on that and make the decision. I'm just talking kind of off the back of my head of I think this is what happened. But that totem height is actually a really important thing to go after. Now, just on that, in the Gamesplanation, I believe that I have neglected a couple of the rules. I will put little notes about it, but I will say that the end of the game will happen when the deck runs out the second time, or when one of the players has placed all of their tents. So that's the other one. It hasn't come up in games I've played, but it's worth kind of keeping your eye on all of those tents. In fact, in games I've played, be very aware of the number of tents you're trying to place and the number of totems, because as soon as you run out of totems, you can't place any more. And so you're literally pulled back to having to put tents down. If there's not really any tent spots, you can't really put anything down. You're kind of just waiting for others to finish the game at that point. And so there's a real balance on when you're going to get to using all the stuff, or how many pieces you're able to put out at any one time. But having said that, having all of your totems out is actually a good thing, because it gets more likely that you'll get the points for the majority totems. Whereas having only a few of the totems out, you're probably not going to get those majorities. And there's a potential large amount of points that are available from the totems. And the other element of the rules is that instead of actually playing cards to put pieces out, you can discard a card to pick up a card. And it feels like that's a little bit of a kind of sideline rule. It's been forgotten from my Gamesplanation. Be aware of it. I'll put in a little text to say this is a thing, but it's actually forgotten from that, simply because I've never used it. It feels like if I'm throwing a card out, I probably should just play something with it. The only time that that's really a viable usage of that ruling is if you actually have nothing you can play in. Get rid of a card, pick up a card that has a spot that you could actually play in. So if you have no totem pieces left and you've only got tents, you need to find the couple of spots that are around the board and be able to place in them. So picking up cards that help you be able to put into those, that's a possibility. That seems like the only kind of, it's an edge case ruling. So look, I'll leave it with you to see what you think of that. Now, this game feels like it was a Kickstarter game. There are some extra pieces in the box. They feel dramatically like they were just kind of thrown in at the last moment because people were upping their pledge and, we need some more stuff to say, hey, if we get to this pledge level, we'll get this stuff in. And so there's this extra little bits that are added in. I haven't played with them. I have put them into my Gamesplanation, but I'm not 100% on how they're used. There is a little table saying that if you use one of them, there's a multiplier of 2 on the points, a multiplier of 3, multiplier of 4. There's some holes in the rules that are actually on there that will probably need to be looked up. I'm assuming there's something on Board Game Geek. I haven't looked them up because I haven't used them, to be honest with you. But there's a multiplier that comes with those, and just it feels like there should be some extra rulings on the back of the book to help with those. It feels like they've just been added in because I need to add something in. So I don't actually see the necessity to play with them. As I say, they are in the Gamesplanation, but I don't play them in the Gamesplay. Please be aware of that. If you like those extra little bits, that's cool. But please comment below to say what they're there for, what they're good for. Like, cause it's a multiplier. And if you've got 4 totems, you're getting like a multiplier of 5, and that's really good and really huge points. But there's not really any specifics in the book saying what it looks like to have that 5 multiplier, and is the 5 multiplier just on this small area of tents, or is it on every tent? The placement of so 2 of them are for tents, 2 of them are for the totem poles. The ones for the totem poles are placed on top of the totem. Does that mean that no one else is now able to place onto that totem? These questions are things that come into my mind as I'm playing, or as I'm looking through the rules. but aren't really answered. And it might just be me overthinking stuff, but it still feels like we could do this or we could not. It's not really spelt out. And the way they're scored isn't really spelt out 100%. I'm assuming, notice assuming, that in order to get the multipliers, you'd need to actually be scoring things with those totems on it. So to get the 4 multiplier, all 4 of the tent markers will need to be in the same area, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Yeah, I don't know. If it does feel like it might be a little bit of a lopsided thing, it just literally added for the Kickstarter, which hasn't been really play tested as much as it probably should be, because the rest of the game is actually really good. I really appreciate that. It plays nicely. It plays relatively easily, and there's enough going on to make you think, but not so much that you get stuck with people at the table. And I really appreciate the game, but these totems, they don't sit really well for me. They don't add that much. The rest of the game is really good. The art is really good. The cards are that kind of thin, long guys. I really appreciate that. I don't think they need to be, but I really appreciate that. Because in essence, you're only using that little bit of the top corner of the card to see what they're about. The rest is just an artwork, and it's the same artwork for each type of card. So, you know, they could have got away with a smaller card, but I actually really liked using the bigger cards, so I'm not going to complain about that. I do appreciate that. Once again, it feels like it's probably a Kickstarter addition. It's like, oh, if we get to this point, we'll go to the bigger cards. The box feels like, or looks like it has a space for an extra totem, so I'm assuming there'll be an expansion coming, which has a 6th player in there. That's an assumption. I don't know anything. I haven't actually read anything on this game at all. I've just literally played it and Gamesplaned it. So please take that with a grain of salt for whatever it's worth. But look, I think I'll leave that there. Please go ahead and watch my Gamesplanation to get a feel for how the game actually plays. If you have any games that you would like to be Gamesplaned, please shoot me an email to thegamesplainer@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter @thegamesplainer to keep up to date with the games that I'm playing. Subscribe to my videos to keep up to date with the games that I'm gamesplaining. And until next time, enjoy gaming.